Ellis Glass observed how the palm leaves glowed against the cast-iron sky through his picture window. He shook his glass of Arnold Palmer, took a swig, and puckered his lips. Too much lemonade. If this was to be his last drink, it should at least taste right. Ellis rose from his easy chair in a series of jerks and took his glass to the kitchen. A deputy had stopped by the previous evening. Ellis hadn't opened the door because he wasn't sure if the sheriff's department could legally force him to evacuate or not. Not intending to find out, he hid in a back room until the deputy yelled, "If anybody's inside, the last ferry is leaving in 1 hour from the South Terminal. Evacuation is mandatory." The deputy, likely deducing from Ellis's missing car that Ellis had gone, got in his cruiser and drove south. He would stop at every house until he reached the pier. Ellis had sold his car on the mainland and deposited the money in his savings account, which was willed to the island pet rescue and shelter. He hoped it would be enough to cover most of their impending repairs. He knew before he missed that last ferry off the island that doing so isolated him from any chance of rescue. Maybe the minimum Category 4 hurricane would spare him. Likely, it would not. At age 67, a widower living mostly off of Social Security, Ellis lacked reason or motivation to carry on. For financial reasons, he could not possibly remain living on the island for long. He would have to uproot himself from his home just to be able to afford groceries. Going back to work was out of the question. Jobs were sparse on the island, and Ellis would not bear commuting to the mainland. The ferry ride took 40 minutes alone. Realistically, he still had plenty of years ahead, but years to do what? He failed to find any direction to commit to. All of Ellis's old friends had left years before, either to pursue an opportunity or, mostly, because they could not afford island living anymore. Ellis's kids did not speak to him even when he tried to call. He didn't blame them. The Arnold Palmer in his hand was the first drink he had tasted in 22 years, ever since getting sober, just a tad too late. His children grew up knowing him as an alcoholic who slept all morning and growled at them all night. Once he realized what a terrible father he had been, sobriety came easy, just not soon enough. The kids were already graduating high school and entering college. With bright futures ahead of them, they'd been ready to forget their haggard so-called father and leave him behind. Ellis's head swirled. His first drink in 22 years was hitting pretty hard. "Here's to the end," he said, raising his glass. The tallest 2 palm trees he could see were bent nearly in half by the intensifying winds. Fat raindrops occasionally hammered the glass. Ellis wondered if the rain alone might grow powerful enough to shatter the window. He decided probably not, and began speculating instead on how the window would break, which led to the question of how he would actually die. Drowning? Something smashing through the window, bludgeoning or impaling him? Maybe the wind would simply burst through and suffocate him like a vacuum if it didn't bring the whole house down to crush him first. It was not that Ellis wanted to die, but he felt too tired to keep living. The island was all he had ever known, and if the hurricane was going to erase it, well, it could go ahead and erase him too. He decided he knew how he wanted to go. Ellis walked up the road after he finished his drink. His raincoat blew up like a hot air balloon and dragged him backwards, once even lifting him onto his toes until he unzipped it and let it flap behind him like a cape. Rain blew sideways into his face, big ping-pong ball droplets. Still, he marched on, determined to reach the beach where he learned to surf. He walked the uneven path between 2 houses, one already battered by a fallen tree, and up the grassy dune behind them. He gazed out over the beach. The sand, like the palm leaves earlier, appeared to glow in contrast against the overboiling storm. Waves swelled afar, growing into monsters before crashing down and taking bites out of the beach. Sand mixed with the blowing rain, pelting Ellis as he stood atop the dune, looking across the beach. The sky mirrored the ocean, its roiling black clouds matching the violent waves. Seagulls, which normally infested the area, were nowhere to be seen. They had all begun to vanish days ago. Ellis wondered what it was they, small and stupid birds, were so desperate to live for. Looking out over the ocean as the hurricane spun toward the island, Ellis feared its power. However, he could not help but respect it. He watched the waves rise, curl, and crash. They looked like the many fingers of an eldritch beast rising from below the island, reaching up and pulling it down one loose chunk at a time. How easy it would be to walk to the edge of the water, to let one of those giant hands scoop him away forever. He could simply be washed away to become part of the great ocean. The force of the water would end him in a deafening instant. He had nothing to fear. He raised his arms to let his raincoat blow away and kept them raised. He shut his eyes, taking in the last few moments in which he would need to breathe. He could taste a small trace of lemon and the bitter tines of sweet tea on his tongue. It reminded him to manifest gratitude for the small treasures of life, the little things he and most everyone he knew took for granted. The smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of a toddler's laugh, the feeling of another person's warm skin against his own, something he had missed for a long time, like sunlight available on the darkest of days and in the thick of night. These were all things Ellis had once loved, but that no longer held any meaning for him. Life, at the end, felt entirely different than it had in the beginning or middle. Hope. That is what Ellis realized was missing. Without hope, his life had fallen flat, like bread without yeast, and rather than let himself deflate any further, he had chosen to meet his end. Ellis, soaking wet, standing against the pushing wind, watching the clouds swirl and the ocean roil, walked down the dune to what remained of the beach. A massive wave rose before him and crashed a few yards ahead. It sprayed him, and he tasted the rich ocean on his lips. Water rushed up the beach, rising as high as Ellis's knees before getting sucked back. The sand around his feet crumbled away as the water dragged it in. It wanted Ellis, too. He could feel it, luring him in. He stepped a little closer. There it was, just offshore, the swell that would erase him. He watched it build and accelerate. Soon it would stretch into a wall. To the north, barely audible above the wind and waves, Ellis heard the piercing tone of a car horn. It blared long and constant bleats of desperation, and suddenly everything Ellis had felt up until that moment vanished. In an instant, he felt terrified, not for himself, but for the unknown other sounding that horn. It sputtered, then blared again. A cry for help. Who else would respond? Ellis pivoted on his heels and sprinted away from the behemoth wave. It thundered onto the beach, devouring the ground Ellis had been standing on. Debris was spinning through the air on the opposite side of the dunes. Ellis could see a few houses already missing shingles, gutters, and siding. He started feeling flecks of flying detritus cut into his face and bare arms as he climbed over the dunes. A road closure barricade cartwheeled past as Ellis emerged onto the road. Faint pulses of lightning lit his way, though the brutal wind drowned out their thunder. A large piece of twisted scrap metal grated down the street, but Ellis could barely even hear it. He covered his head with his elbows, stooped as low as possible, and hustled against the wind towards the honking car. He found it near his house, a white Toyota Avalon parked in the middle of the street with its hazards on. Ellis realized those blinking red lights were the first sign of electricity he had seen since leaving the house. The power had finally gone out. Dodging a neighbor's trash bin, skating up the sidewalk on its face, Ellis reached the Toyota and gripped the side view mirror for stability. Rain was pouring over the windows with such torrential fervor as to blind him from who or what was inside the car. "Do you need help?" he yelled through the waterfall on the window. The window opened a crack, and a high, feminine voice yelled something back. "What?" Ellis shouted. "Get in!" He understood this time. Unsure whose car he was getting into, Ellis obeyed. He laughed internally at how glad he was to escape from the cold wind and biting debris for somebody who was ready to let an ocean wave beat him into oblivion just minutes before. A porch umbrella narrowly missed his shoulder as he opened the passenger door, an action which depleted most of his remaining strength. He braced the door with his left foot and fell gracelessly into the car. Then he pressed his hands against the door, drew in his foot, and let the wind shut him in. "I thought I was all alone," she cried, and threw her arms around his dripping shirt. He did not get a chance to see who she was until after patting her back a couple of times and gently pushing her away. She had long hair, mostly gray with a few defiant strands of black mixed in. Her skin was weathered and tan, that of an islander, which made it difficult to pin her exact age. Ellis put her at 70, but a very healthy 70. Except her right leg was in a brace from her foot to just above her knee. Her purse lay on top of the dashboard. Sunglasses, lipstick, coins, and packages of fruit snacks had spilled out of it and been caught where the dash met the windshield. Bulging black trash bags and a folding walker occupied the back seat, but otherwise the car looked and smelled very clean. This elderly woman had clearly evacuated in a hurry, but hours too late. "Why are you still here?" Ellis asked. "It took me way too long to pack, thanks to this," she answered weepily and gestured at her broken leg. "Then I heard the sheriff's department knocking at my door, but I guess they couldn't hear me over the storm when I called out. I didn't even get out of the bedroom before they left because of this stupid leg. And then, oh, wouldn't you believe it? I couldn't find my keys. I had to go through half of this stuff to find them." "That's bad luck," Ellis replied. "My name's Ellis, and I live just a couple of houses up that way. We should get you out of the street." "I don't think it's safe to drive any further, and it's definitely not safe to get out. I'm Naomi, by the way." "I really think we should get inside," Ellis pled. What was the point of giving up his quick erasure if this woman was just going to get them both killed anyway? Naomi protested. "We can't stay here, though. We need to get to the ferry." Ellis was trying to think of how to tell her the ferry was long gone when, "Get down!" he shouted. He barely pulled Naomi down before a helicoptering signpost impaled the windshield in front of her. Huddled against him, she began to sob. Ellis worked the signpost back and forth until he could shove it out of the car. Unfortunately, it took a large chunk of safety glass with it, leaving a gaping hole through which the violent storm could reach them. "Naomi, you have to drive up to my house. We'll be way safer there." He didn't think his house would necessarily be that safe at all if the storm got much worse, but anything would have been better than the breached Toyota they were currently trapped in. "I can't do it," she cried. "Why?" "I just can't." Ellis thought quickly. He said, "I'm going to get out. You slide over to this side so I can drive, okay?" "You're getting out?" Naomi yelled. Ellis replied, "Unless you're going to drive, I have to." Naomi looked through Ellis. He could barely make out her face due to the wind howling through the windshield undeserving of its name, making him squint. But without a word, Naomi faced forward, slammed her foot on the brake, and put the car in drive. With a sigh of resignation, she launched them into the storm. Rain sprayed in, and bits of safety glass tinkled around their legs and feet, piled in the seats on either side of them. Lightning and lightning alone lit the short stretch of road before Ellis shouted, "Pull in here." Naomi jerked the wheel right and turned onto Ellis's gravel driveway. Just pull it up to the front door. Get as close as you can. Naomi drove right up to Ellis's front step. Wait here. I don't think I locked the door, but I'll check. Ellis forced the car door open and practically crawled onto his porch. He realized he didn't have his keys, so if the door was locked, he would have to find another way in. He was surprised none had already been opened by the storm. So far, all of his windows were intact, despite him leaving them uncovered. Luckily, Ellis had not habitually locked the front door when he walked down to meet the storm at the beach. He waved for Naomi to come, then ashamedly rushed back to her, remembering her braced leg. He held Naomi's door with the last of his strength, knowing if he let go, Naomi would lose both of her legs. Once she was clear of the door, he let go. It slammed so hard the window shattered. Hurry, come on. Ellis led Naomi into the house he thought he had left behind for good, the shelter he had previously abandoned. He instinctively flipped the light switch, forgetting the power outage. Hold on, I have flashlights somewhere, and I'll get you a towel or blanket or something, he said, then disappeared. Naomi inspected the house in which she would quite possibly die. She was a relative newcomer to the island and had yet to notice Ellis's small beach cottage tucked away in the trees which she now watched bending near the breaking point through the picture window. Leaves flew into the gray-black sky, tracing invisible helixes. One massive palm leaf was turning somersaults and trying to fall, but continuously being retrieved by the wind and lifted again for more tricks. Naomi watched it spin for a few seconds before realizing, "You didn't cover your windows!" she yelled. Ellis was graced by being in another room, looking for a blanket, and thus did not need to mask his hurried search for a lie. He called back, "I didn't get around to it in time." Naomi said, "Didn't get around? What were you so busy doing?" She did not sound accusatory, but Ellis felt accused nonetheless. He felt guilty that the only shelter he could provide was so ill-prepared. He found a clean blanket for Naomi and grabbed his shower towel to dry himself with. He brought them both into the living room and handed Naomi the blanket. She thanked him. He offered her the easy chair and dragged an old wooden rocking chair his aunt had passed down to him over to the window to sit next to her. "So, Ellis," she said, after they watched the hurricane in silence for a minute, "you didn't prepare your house against the storm, and when you found me, you walked up from behind me. You didn't come from this direction, you came from the beach," Ellis finished. Why lie to this stranger he would probably die with soon? "So what? Are you some kind of storm chaser? A thrill seeker? Does living on the edge make you feel young again? I just can't wrap my head around why someone would choose to stay back during such a deadly hurricane unless they had some kind of death wish." Ellis wished he had brought a fresh drink with him to the window so he could take a long sip from it to hide his face and give him an excuse not to respond. He pretended to fixate on a piece of fencing that went flying over the treetops before disappearing amongst their tumultuous branches. When he looked back at Naomi, she was staring at him with penetrating, thoughtful, and sympathetic eyes. "What is it really?" she asked kindly. "Depression? PTSD? Did you lose someone?" "Everybody," Ellis answered, low enough to be masked by the rumbling wind. Loud enough for Naomi, he said, "Some of them are dead, others are just gone. I'm not a part of their life anymore, and I don't have much left to live for myself." "So you just decided that was it, huh?" Naomi asked. Ellis could not believe how conversational she sounded. He supposed it would be silly to tiptoe around any subject when death was leering at them through the picture window, threatening to punch through at any moment and end them both. The house swayed, rocking like a wide boat. Ellis said, "I didn't see the point in fleeing to save a life I'm not that interested in living. And what if I did survive, but this house and everything I know was destroyed? I'd have to rebuild a life I don't even want anymore. Can't you see what a waste that would be?" Naomi was quiet, then said, "You came back, though. What made you leave the beach?" Your horn, Ellis replied, as if it should have been obvious. I heard honking and I figured somebody needed help. You were right about that, Naomi said, smiling. So now that I'm about as safe as I can be, although I do wish you'd covered your windows, what are you going to do now? You going to leave me here and go back down to the beach? Let the storm sweep you away, huh? And don't make me your excuse. There's no time left to do anything else for me. Don't say that. We'll figure something out. There aren't any windows in the bathroom. We might be safer in there. It'll be tight, but thunder shook them. Ellis observed the window glass pulsing slightly in and out like it was made of plastic wrap instead of glass. Naomi did too. She said, Ellis, it doesn't sound like you want to die to me. It sounds like you're just scared of what might come next. No. Scared? Ellis retorted. I'm exhausted. I built a life already, and it didn't turn out so great in the end. I can't go through all that again. I'm just too tired. I walked through this storm to rescue you, and you think I'm scared? I do, Naomi said sagely. Living is the scariest thing we all do. We just do so much of it, we take it for granted. What were you, some kind of philosophy professor? Ellis asked, not even realizing he was already using the past tense. Naomi laughed again. Ellis wished he could laugh with her, but he realized he might not know the first thing about living. He existed in a beautiful place during an age of unprecedented convenience and ease, yet the prospect of enjoying life felt so foreign and, honestly, fictional. To him, life was toil. It was getting through the day, going to sleep, and doing it all again. But something about it made this injured old woman try driving through a hurricane to chase it. If only he could understand that thing for himself. Dark seawater splashed up the driveway and between the trees. That meant the waves had grown higher than the dunes. Water rushed towards Ellis's house and ran through the trellises between its stilts. Ellis and Naomi could hear it gushing beneath them, a slight variation of the sound of the rain and wind. What made you come back for me? Naomi asked. Ellis said, I don't know. Human decency? Naomi replied, I've heard of people sacrificing their life to save somebody, but not their death. So what do you value about my life, but not your own? I'm not really sure how to answer that. I guess I assume most people probably want to stay alive for one thing or another. I think we all do, said Naomi, including you. But I just said, I heard you, but I think you're wrong. I think you do want to live, but you don't know how, or, like I said, you're scared to. You feel like you reached the finish line prematurely, and now you're out of the race. That's actually about right, Ellis admitted. Then, surprising himself, he felt inspired to ask, So how do you do it? You're older than I am, out here alone, but you still risked everything to try to catch that ferry even though I'm guessing you knew it was long gone. Our circumstances are not always our fault, but what we do with them is. That's why I still got in my car and tried to make the ferry. What if it had been delayed? What if the deputies were still stuck there and could help me? I had to try. Either way, there was a good chance something bad could happen to me, and I decided I'd rather go out trying to survive than hiding in the dark. But why? Ellis asked. You have family? Kids? Where are they now? Family is everything, Naomi said. But it doesn't have to be the family you're born with. One of the bigger trees snapped. The upper half twisted around, pointing into the open window for a moment, then split in half and fell into the water. This might be the end for us, Ellis said. If you love life so much, doesn't that scare you? I'm not afraid, said Naomi, smiling, because death is something life has in store for us all. Part of the fun is not knowing when it's going to come. So you aren't sad it's over? Sad? That's a different question, Ellis. Of course I'm sad, but I'm not going to let that sour the moment. Ellis took this in. His mind had difficulty computing Naomi's outlook. Her wiring clearly followed a different scheme than his. Did he suddenly wish they were not about to die? He still wished he could save her, but no. He did feel a twinge of remorse that he would not get a chance to experience life the way Naomi did. He wondered what might have happened if he'd started over somewhere, or maybe just picked up a new hobby he could have indulged to the nth degree, having nothing but time for it. He wondered, briefly, if Naomi was some type of guardian angel sent to save him, like in It's a Wonderful Life. If so, she had most likely come too late, but maybe not. Ellis felt like something had been fixed inside of him. He still did not crave life, but he felt an unexpected contentedness which he previously had not noticed was missing. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," he said, emphasizing the words to imply she had, in a way, saved him. She smiled at him. "I'm just glad somebody heard me." The house rocked. Ellis could not tell whether from wind or the water beneath it. The water's elevation almost reached the window. Water began seeping under the front door, and long rivulets slithered around the pair in the living room. Naomi closed her eyes. Ellis did too. A loud crack came from the back of the house. Ellis felt the whole thing tip, but kept his eyes closed. Another crack, and the tip became a slide. The stilts gave out, and the house became an unseaworthy boat. The trees behind the house caught it, holding it in place as the flood continued to rise. The picture window shattered, letting seawater gush into the living room. Naomi blindly reached for Ellis's hand and found it. They interlocked their fingers as icy water rose around their ankles. All at once, the floor gave out, the walls collapsed, and the roof came down. And the storm was alone. If you visit the revitalized island now, decades since the obliterating hurricane, you may hear the locals speak of ghosts. It seems everyone there has some sort of encounter to tell you about. Surfers have been rescued, wandering children have been reunited with their parents, and tourists who have had a little too much fun on the beach have been guided home by steady and comforting hands from someone unseen. As creepy as this sounds, those who have experienced it say it is anything but. Legend has it, Ellis and Naomi never fully died. That both of them, their spirits inspired to continue, remain on the island to this day. The storms of their lives having passed, they exist together now in the calm after. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and bonus Into the Woods episodes, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram at The Warning Woods. If you feel ready, meet me here next week for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.